All right, how is everybody doing out there? Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We look at various theories of everything. We've been fixated for the last 9 months or so on doing the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. And Mr. Larson was an engineer who lived in mostly in Oregon, born in North Dakota. In the 20th century. He died back in 1990, but not before he wrote many great books on various aspects of everything, including metaphysics, religion, psychology, philosophy, chemistry, economics, physics, astronomy, and other subjects. Biology, a little bit on biology. And his thing is called the reciprocal system of theory. And that's because of the contents of this universe. Larson said that the universe is composed entirely of motion. And at first he actually used the word space-time instead of motion, but he eventually came down to call it motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. And that sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. So space and time had no independent existence. They only exist together in motion. In other words, they're somewhat of an illusion, but they work for figuring things out. And all of the kinds of motion that we know of are strictly and exclusively relationships between space and time, basically fractions with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. Probably the most accessible kinds of motion that we know of are speed. Speed is measured in space over time. The bike is moving 20 miles per hour, 20 miles of space in 1 hour of time. And also acceleration, which is space over time to the second power. I dropped the rock out the window and it fell at 9.8 meters per second squared. 9.8 meters of space in 1 second squared. So space over time to the second power. But all of the other scientific quantities that we know of are also relations just like that. In Larson's system, matter is time to the third power over space to the third power. And energy is time over space. Larson published his two fundamental postulates back in the late 1950s. And from that, he basically deduced a whole theoretical universe. And the first postulate is the main one. Basically, he's saying that the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. And space and time both have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in 3 dimensions, x, y, z coordinates in space, and maybe I, j, k coordinates in time. And then space and time both progress in a scalar manner. Scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude but has no specific direction, kind of like a clock. Larson called that clock time or clock space. Clock is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. In space, you would envision this using a balloon with dots on it. Blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other, but in no specific direction. That is really the progression of space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And then space and time are both quantized. They both come in only discrete units. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. If you don't have a full unit, then you don't have either one of those things. If you don't have a full unit of space, you don't have space. If you don't have a full unit of time, you don't have time. If you have 1 unit of space per 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light, which Larson calls unit speed. 1/1 equals 1. And unit speed for Larson was the background, or the null point, or the 0 point, or the origin, or the ether of this universe. So for Larson, half the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light, which Larson refers to as the cosmic sector. And half the universe is moving slower than the speed of light. Larson calls the material sector, which is the sector that we're familiar with and that our scientists have made measurements from and observations. But we can extrapolate what we know from the material universe over to the cosmic universe because of the reciprocal relationship between space and time. So all we have to do is invert the space and time relations there. So in the material sector, we've got coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and clock time. The time is always getting later and later and later. But in the cosmic sector, we invert, and we end up with coordinate time and clock space, the progression of space. And so it becomes a powerful system because you can really understand what's going on in a region of the universe that you don't really have access to in terms of observing it. And so Larson started with that and eventually, wrote a bunch of books, passed away, and he developed somewhat of a following, not a large one, very, very small, but some powerful researchers within that group, including Dr. KVK Nehru, who wrote many, many articles on the reciprocal system. A lot of them are very technical, but we are reading one of his articles that is called, I think I mistitled it yesterday when I was going through it, but the article is called Consciousness, Motion, Space, and Time. And we started reading that article 1 or 2 days ago, and so I believe 2 days ago. So if you want to get started from the top, then you can go back 2 days and watch those videos. But today we're going to start with the heading called Part 3, The New Paradigm. Since we can convert matter into radiation, as in the atomic bomb, or radiation into matter, as in the atom-smashing machines, neither matter nor radiation would qualify as the basic constituent of the physical universe. And that is something that Larson did say. The fact that E equals mc squared, and you can convert matter to energy and vice versa, that proves that neither one of those things can be the most fundamental thing. There has to be something that underlies both of them, and that is motion. So really the c squared part of the E equals mc squared. Okay, back to Nehru. The reciprocal system shows this basic constituent is motion, or speed, that is, a quantity of space divided by a quantity of time. It demonstrates that all physical phenomena, particles, gravitation, radiation, electricity, magnetism, etc., are different forms of motion. All previous thinking envisaged the physical universe as a universe of matter, embedded in a background of space and time. Even those iconoclastic thinkers like Hobbes and Eddington, who attempted to construct a theory of universe of motion, still imagined the basic units, namely the units of motion, to be embedded in a background of space and time. Now, the great contribution of the reciprocal system is the finding that since space-time is motion, it cannot be a container to itself. It rather constitutes the content of the universe. This is the new paradigm engendered by the reciprocal system. To the present scientist, all that exists in the universe exists in space and in time. Anything that does not fit into this assumption is regarded by him as either non-existent or as non-scientific. This is the basis of scientific materialism. The reciprocal system recognizes the true status of space and time as the contents of the universe and not the background or the container. It thus removes all the impediments for the scientific consideration of the metaphysical and the parapsychological phenomena. It might be worth mentioning that the senses of vision and touch, to a great extent, foster this container viewpoint of space and time. The developments in the field of virtual reality bring home this point very dramatically. By presenting computer-generated visual images to the eyes and touch sensations through intelligent hand gloves, the illusion of solid objects extended in space, of motion through space, and of reality in general could be created. The new paradigm enjoins us not envision reality as contained in space and time. To relinquish this long-standing habit of imagining everything in a setting of space and time is one of the most difficult tasks to accomplish. Okay, this section is called the symmetry and the reciprocity. The reciprocal system finds that space and time are the two reciprocal aspects of motion and have symmetrical properties. Time is three-dimensional as space is, and space too continuously expands or progresses as time does. The secret doctrine, indeed, that is theosophy there, I guess Blavatsky and so on. The secret doctrine, indeed, teaches that space is all that exists. The universe does not expand into a pre-existing space. It is space itself which expands. In the local environment, the inward motion we call gravitation counterbalances the outward progression of space. However, at large distances from our galaxy, where gravitation becomes negligible, we do observe the space progression as the recession of the galactic systems from each other. And that was done, in fact, by the Hubble telescope, that did observe that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. Conventional cosmology mistakenly attributes the galactic recession to a purely hypothetical Big Bang. Regarding the multidimensionality of time, one recalls C.W. Leadbeater refer to this in his little book, The Monad. He mentions that time has at least three dimensions as far as his clairvoyance could show. Since a universe of motion cannot exist without the existence of motion, unit speed, which is the maximum that can exist, is the neutral state of the universe. Unit speed, not zero speed, is the condition of rest in the universe. Even in the state of pralaya, this perpetual motion at unit speed exists. Manifestation begins when the speed deviates either downward or upward from unity. In view of the reciprocal relation between space and time, we discover that, in addition to the sector of the physical universe we know of, there is another sector, the cosmic sector, purely physical, but with the roles of space and time interchanged. While our sector, the material sector, is apparently set in three-dimensional space, the cosmic sector is set in three-dimensional time. While in the material sector, purely mechanistic systems run down from order to disorder, or less order, the inverse is true in the cosmic sector. As a consequence, when a control unit belonging to the cosmic sector takes hold of the mechanical arrangement of organic molecules, the living cell comes into being. This control unit, called life, insofar as it pertains to the cosmic sector, seems to us as a mode of motion in time. Recall from the Mahatma letters, I believe that's more Blavatsky, try and imagine life apart from organism, and what remains of it? Simply a mode of motion, which, unless our doctrine of the all-pervading, infinite, omnipresent life is accepted, has to remain unsolved. The reciprocal system now provides us with a logical possibility of extending the study of physical systems to biological systems. Okay, and this section is called Beyond Space and Time. There are other significant conclusions following from the understanding of the true nature of space and time given to us by the reciprocal system. Possibility of the existence of universes of motion not limited to three dimensions is the first one. Possibility of existences not limited to the physical type is the next important conclusion. There could be motion other than space-time-like. In this comprehensive sense, motion encompasses consciousness and intelligence in general. Larson calls this the metaphysical sector. In his book Beyond Space and Time, posthumously published, Larson discusses how this view leads us to a scientific understanding of the why and the how of ethics, and also the so-called paranormal phenomena. Now, if you go back about 6 months, I covered that book, Beyond Space and Time, in its entirety. It went on for about 90 videos or so. So you can go back and listen to that book in its entirety. While the control units pertaining to life, like the ones controlling the individual cells, the group souls, etc., belong to the cosmic sector, those pertaining to awareness and intelligence, like the egos, the monads, etc., belong to the metaphysical sector. In view of the fact that the latter sector is totally beyond space and time, the common concepts of plurality and distinction do not apply to the structures of this sector in exactly the same manner in which they apply to the structures of the physical plane. Okay, I think we're going to leave it right there. I think we maybe have time for one more segment here. This segment, or heading number 6, is called non-locality. One of the most baffling concepts of quantum theory is that of non-locality. Particles seem to have a group behavior, while spatially unconnected in certain phenomena like superconductivity and ferromagnetism. When we consider distances of the size of atoms, particles do not seem to exist at any distinct locations. In the reciprocal system, non-locality arises out of the quantization of space, time, and speed. While the speeds in the material sector range from 0 to unity, which is identified as the speed of light, in the cosmic sector, the inverse is true. That is, the possible inverse speeds range from unity to infinity. Therefore, while the origin, that is the fixed location, of our conventional three-dimensional spatial reference frame is at 0 speed, the origin of the three-dimensional temporal reference frame of the cosmic sector is at 0 inverse speed, which is tantamount to infinite speed from our reckoning, and consequently appears non-local. Whenever we come across phenomena in which motion in time, not to be confused with time travel, whenever we come across phenomena in which motion in time occurs, as in the example cited above, non-locality makes its appearance. And section 7 is called Emergent Evolution and the Implicate Order. The reciprocal system also enlightens us on a controversial aspect of evolution of biological life and intelligence. It reconciles causality with spontaneity and creativity. Since in the material sector of the universe, a given set of causes mechanistically gives rise to the same consequences, we need to abandon strict causality if we have to leave room for spontaneous creative emergence. But since we recognize that the control units pertaining to life and intelligence pertain to the cosmic and metaphysical sectors, which are ipso facto beyond our conventional spatio-temporal reference frames, the conventional view of causality does not apply to them. It applies only to the material structures. While it is possible for strict causality to exist in the material organization, there is total freedom for creation of new life forms and emergent intelligence. Implicate order seems to emerge from entropy-dominated material systems, since these are the ones directly accessible to physical observations. In reality, it stems from the metaphysical sector. Okay, we're going to leave it off right there, and we will start up tomorrow with this section 8, which is called The Holistic Universe. All right, thanks for tuning in today, and hope to see you tomorrow. Have a great night.